Hey everyone, this is James here, bringing you another Italian genre film review. Today I am going to be talking about another film by Damiano Damiani, a really great director who I liked on my initial go-around on his films, and who I like even more when I'm rewatching a lot of his different films and kind of filling in the gaps. And that is another great thriller from him from the 70s, Goodbye and Amen. So I actually did go ahead and buy the Blu-ray for this one. Had just been enjoying those Costa Nostra films so much on the Arrow channel that decided to go ahead and buy this kind of solo one. Looks great. I liked this one when I had first seen it 4 or 5 years ago off of a private tracker site, and it looks fantastic. Like a lot of Damiani films, doesn't necessarily have like the show-stopping visuals, but it is very, very good visually. And in fact, I think this one might be play more into kind of my own preferred sort of visual schemes and stuff like that, especially in the really, really excellent conclusion that caps up the finale here. So before we get too far into it, the basic synopsis is, as the CIA is planning a regime change for an African nation, one of their diplomats becomes suspected of sniping people outside of a luxury hotel set in Italy. The reason why I said Italian genre film and not giallo or poliziotteschi here is this one's a little tricky to place. In some ways, Damiani's films in general are obviously genre films, but are a little challenging to place into those categories. Usually, I would place it into Eurocrime or the Italian crime filmography. Roberto Curti puts this film in there. Eurocrime, poliziotteschi, it's probably the logical place, at least for kind of the way that the Anglosphere tends to categorize things. But in listening to a couple of the extra features and things like that, I noticed that a lot of people, the Italians in particular, were referring to this as kind of more of a mystery, jolly. And I had never really thought about that film that way, so it's interesting to hear it classified. And my understanding of kind of the way that Italians tend to classify things is they have a little bit of a broader definition from a jolly, which is one reason why I don't adhere to a really, really specific kind of very Argento-centric version where it's like you need to have the black gloves and things like that. That might be one jolly stereotype, but I think the genre is bigger than that. So it's interesting to see people refer to this film for someone like me who even has a broader definition, didn't even think of this as giallo. But in some ways it is. It is kind of like this mystery elements and things like that. And really it is just a very, very propulsive thriller that combines a lot of different movie ideas from other genres too. So you have a little bit of political thriller there, but it's kind of its own thing too. It's a kidnap scenario. There's really kind of two scenarios wrapped in together. And I really, really like it when it does stuff like that. So it plays into a lot of like the personal things that I tend to like when I come to watch a genre film. So political thrillers, things like that, I do tend to really enjoy. In that sense, it also stands out compared to his other films. Like, if you really get into his filmography, you'll notice certain themes. Like, he talks a lot about institutions, specifically the mafia. This one, you could read into it similarly about how it's a little bit against kind of like the U.S. foreign involvement and skeptical of the CIA, not dissimilar from A Bullet for the General. I think A Bullet for the General is a little more precisely displayed in terms of that. But it's a little different than just things he had been working with at the time, like the Franco Nero films, things like that. And things he would continue to work on, like A Man Onto His Knees, another kind of mafia film. So he was doing a lot of films that I think had a little more specific targets. Similar to A Day of Now and a number of other Damiani films, this is based off of a book. Unlike that film, this book, I think the impression I get is that it's very much kind of a cheaper paperback, and he changed quite a bit from the premise. So he did go ahead, he wrote this film as well, not uncommon for him to get the writing credit as well. Like a lot of his films, it's a little bit longer than your standard 90 minutes, wham bam Italian genre film. It's 108 minutes. I can see why. I think this film absolutely holds my attention for 108 minutes. I think it's really, really well-paced. The way that information is slowly revealed to you, all of the different twists that they present, I think it's very, very well done. It's interesting to hear that the reputation of this is a little bit lesser. From the impression I got, is Damiani thought that this was kind of a job for hire thing, and he didn't have quite as high of an impression of it as like I Am Afraid, that came out just around the same time, or a couple of the other films he did. Nevertheless, while it might not be as incisive in terms of thematic things, I think it has a lot going for it. I think it's a really, really good thriller. I think the cinematography done by Luigi Cavalier, famous Italian cinematographer who did Deep Red, New York Ripper, Lizard and Woman's Skin, I'm Afraid, I think does a great job. The look of the film is very, very different, obviously, than kind of his southern Italy, Sicilian set. Eurocrime Poliziotteschi's 2 kind of has this more cooler, modern, icy feel to it, too. What I like about the film, too, is the way it basically kind of takes place over, 24 to 30 hours, and how we start at night, and how we start with the sniper kind of taking shots at people. And then we go into the daytime and stuff like that, and you really feel the lighting shift and things like that. And then you go back into the darkness, and we have this really, really impressionistic, lots of silhouettes filmed finale that kind of takes different elements from Jolly in the sense that we have these disguise costumes and things like that. But it does it in a really, really immaculate way. I like the way he plays with kind of the lighting from sources. We have these really intimidating kind of SWAT costumes that I'd never seen before that are being used by kind of the police that have this very boxy feel to it too. Love the designs of those as well. So I think there's a lot of stuff here that works very, very well. So in some sense, it kind of is that paranoid political thriller that you're going to get. It's not exactly like an Alan Pakula film or anything like that, but it has elements of that. It's skeptical of kind of the outside interlopers and authority. Another thing I've noted with a lot of Damiani films and just the projects he chooses to get is the protagonists aren't necessarily great guys. And in this one, it might be one of the worst guys. It's a CIA spy thriller thing. And I think in a lot of films, this sort of spy thriller stuff, and certainly at the time with the Bond films being what they were during the 60s and the 70s, the kind of spy as a good guy would be kind of the default there. But this is a Damiano Damiani film, and so this is not a good guy. In fact, in the Roberto Curti book, the Italian crime filmography, he talks about that very explicitly. So in some ways, it can be seen as very, very anti-007. Interesting companion to something like A State of Siege, which is kind of quote-unquote more of the serious political thriller there, the docu-thriller done by Costa Gavras. I think this is a nice companion to that as well. Musante and Damiani apparently did not get along very well, which is interesting because I think as an actor, I really like Musante in this. Similar to Bird with the Crystal Plumage, I liked him a lot there. Argento didn't like him either. And the impression I get from just reading what everyone has to say about him is he was just a kind of a meddler, and he had different ideas and stuff like that, and could be kind of annoying and sort of tried to impose different things on that. So as a director, I think you're probably naturally inclined to dislike that. Nevertheless, I think as a prevalence in the film and as kind of like your lead person who is navigating us through it, he is very, very good at playing kind of this anti-hero here, and he's much colder and icier than he is in something like Bird with the Crystal Plumage, where he's a lot more personable. Interesting to see Claudia Cardinale come back here. She's really good in what seems like a pretty minor part, and I think is, in the end, one of the supporting parts for sure, where she basically is kind of in the second act of the film, and she plays one of the hostages that the sniper ends up taking. So I suspect that maybe Damiani, she was willing to work with Damiani for a smaller role like this. She just seems very, very overqualified for a more minor role here, but she does help to kind of inject that middle section with kind of tension and energy, just creating a character that you care a little bit more about, just because she's someone that has kind of movie star prowess and presence there. Another thing that I think really sets this film apart too in terms of that is the score is definitely one of the really great ones that Damiani worked with. Not going to say it's his best one, I'd have to really think about that a little more differently, but he worked with the DeAngelis brothers, who are not really known for working with Damiani. They worked with Castellari a lot. And I heard the score and I was like, oh, this could really be kind of one of those post-apocalyptic scores from the 80s too. And it has like kind of this electro beat and things like that. And it's very, very propulsive, and I think helps a lot with just kind of like making the film move forward. And I just love when it's kicking in. One of the things I like to do while I'm writing the outlines for these episodes or just kind of preparing to film is to listen to the soundtracks. And this one really, really is top-notch. So good work by the DeAngelis brothers, who are, I guess, now known as All Over Onions. Interesting name, not necessarily what I would pick, but it's definitely a really, really great one. So they're kind of in this great set of run that they're doing here. So they're kind of more in the Goblin mode of being a little more rock-like music than someone like Ennio Morricone or other kind of the signature Italian composers. Luigi Cavalier lends this one. The look of the film very, very different from Damiani's other films. I think in particular the one thing that really stands out to me, well, two things I guess. First of which is kind of the set that this takes place. This is a lot of this takes place at one location. In this case, it is a Hilton located in Rome, and so there's a lot of playing with kind of the upper class structure. A lot of the side characters that were, well, the background characters, I would say, that kind of weave in. You have like a Texas Ranger type and things like that come in. And the upper class complaining, so it's kind of taking snipes at that and things like that. So I really enjoy that aspect too. The other part that really stands out in terms of that is the costume design, the SWAT costumes I already talked about, and just the way that they dress everyone up similarly at the end. And, the conclusion, I think, is really, really immaculately filmed, where we have this moment where we're turning out the lights, we show everyone getting into disguises, everyone's kind of walking in this regimented pattern, and I think it's really, really an A+ in terms of the conclusion and the way it's done there. There's a few things that you're going to miss out with. I did watch the Italian version of Radiant. Apparently was only able to restore the Italian one, so unfortunately the American version with the American dubbing, which I think I watched the first time, is in much, much lower quality, so I did watch the Italian one this time. So there's references to things like American accents and things like that, Southern accents, I think, specifically. It also plays a little bit with just kind of the idea of a film director. The audio commentary on the film done by, who was it done by? Nathaniel Thompson and Howard Berger comments a lot on that, how it's playing with kind of Damiani's presence as a director, and you have John Steiner trying to be the director at points, and then you also have Tony Musante sort of being the director in the background. But one of the lowest rung characters, and the character that kind of gets moved around like a pawn throughout the film, is kind of like stereotypically handsome, blonde actor that is actually appearing in a Western. So I thought that was kind of funny how we have him basically tied up and basically being kind of an impotent observer who is a pawn in kind of the scheme of things, answers the door totally in the naked. So he's really kind of clowned throughout the film by John Steiner, but also by Damiano Damiani, who's actually designing these things. In listening to one of the interviews with Anthony Siciliano, who was the editor, I believe, on this film, Damiani also was a big storyboarder. He shot a lot less film than other people. He's just very, very meticulous about getting his certain shots. So he has a very, very kind of restrained look to his film, but everything, because he doesn't have those kind of really, really striking shots like someone like a Dario Argento, I think it's easy to think of him as less visual. But in fact, if you look at his films very closely, there's a lot of visual play and things like that, and the way that the shots are blocked, I think is very, very well done. So I think in that sense, he does a very, very good job of just kind of meticulously arranging actors to get what he wants from the film. So it's interesting to hear that he didn't care for this, because a lot of this, I think, feels like he had a good deal of control in just terms of blocking and some of the creative details. Like a lot of Damiani films, it just feels a little more well thought out. Things like the cornflakes, to hear the different people coming and whatnot, those things are really good. And yeah, a lot of the small details, and every shot in that fantastic conclusion could be basically like a painting, every frame of painting. So yeah, just really, really well done, beautifully, visually. So yeah, I'm thumbs up in terms of that. Okay, so let's see. Who won the film? I'm going to give it to Cavalier here, just because Damiani kind of sort of disowned this film in a way. Otherwise, I probably would have given it to him, so just interesting to see. I just think the look of this film is outstanding, as well as like a tough score. Definitely worth a watch for anyone that's interested in Italian genre film in this time period. I think if you like spaghetti westerns, if you like poliziotteschi, I think if you like Jolly, there's something here for you. Don't necessarily go in expecting a certain type of poliziotteschi or Jolly, but I think you will be pretty happy with this film, just because I think it's a really, really solid film. Double feature, I'm going to stick with the anti-CIA theme. This one, it's a little bit more of kind of a symbolic representation. Is A Bullet for the General with the Lou Castel and Klaus Kinski and John Maria Voyante. the great Damiano Damiani spaghetti western that he did in the 60s that really kind of started to kick off his big run. Didn't make a lot of different spaghetti westerns, but this one is really, really worth checking out. And I think probably I would open with that film and then conclude with Goodbye and Amen, which comes about a decade later. Rating, as I seem to give all Damiano Damiani films around this range, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Really, really solid. Thrower, B+, something around that range, I would say. The themes, I think, are not quite as sharp and incisive as they are in some of his other films, but I think as a film, I think you don't even need those themes necessarily to enjoy this film. I think it's perfectly enjoyable as kind of a straightforward, well, not straightforward, but fairly convoluted, but convoluted in a good way, thrill. So thank you all for tuning in. I will see y'all next time. Let me know what you thought of Goodbye and Amen. Yeah, cheers.